What's going on, guys? My name is Triforce Addiction. Welcome back to another COD mobile video. So today we're going to kind of close off this year with, I guess, a end of year review for COD mobile in 2023. So it's been one hell of a year for 2023 in this game. I mean, we had a lot of different changes from good to bad. A lot of stuff, in game that made the game better. Of course, you guys remember that they added very high graphics with ultra frames on certain devices. They did stuff like add max graphics. They also gave you the ability to, I guess, have like these little loadout codes that you could send to your friends, and they could try out the weapons that you have. It's just just so much stuff. So first off, what can we actually discuss about this year? I think the first one, obviously, that we could probably talk about is all the weapons that got released this year. So given that there was 11 seasons in total for 2023, I mean, there was quite a bit of weapons. We had the Dobro, we had the Ballistic Knife, as of recently, we had the Bruin, the Dingo, the HDR, the Maddox, the Growl, the OTS-9, and just so on. And with every weapon, of course, I reviewed every single one of them, how they performed, how they felt, whether or not it was going to be meta, and how they looked like with their certain camos on. So yeah, I mean, I did a lot when it came to the weapons. Of course, obviously, even as of now, I still have diamond on every single gun. I've always done that for every season. And that's something that's obviously not going to change. And I've overall enjoyed all the weapons that were released throughout the entire year. And even when I'm done grinding those weapons diamond, I still use them throughout the entire season. I still give them a chance to see how well they perform in other maps. I mean, throughout this entire season, I was using the Growl, and even last season, I was using the Bruin. I was just, using the new weapons, even though a lot of people wouldn't have unless they were meta. And that's one of the craziest things about this year. I mean, a lot of the weapons that were released did not really become part of the meta. I mean, this was something that was always recurring in the past few years of this game. Whenever a new weapon came out, it would always be the dominant one. I mean, you guys remember the Switchblade, the CBR, stuff like that. I mean, even the PPSH for a time did have a moment to shine. But yeah, it's usually those weapons that would come out on that exact season, they would become part of the meta. For this one, it was kind of different because every weapon that got released, at least for the most part, until the end of this year, wasn't really considered meta at all. If anything, they were considered either average or above average. I think the only one that I could really think that became meta throughout this entire time was probably only the Growl. I would say maybe the Argus or the Maddox were a close second, but overall throughout this entire year, none of them ever really became that great. And of course, with every update, there were different changes to these new weapons, but never to the point, unless it was the Growl, where it would actually help it skyrocket to number 1 or even the top 10. But I would say of all the weapons that were my absolute favorite that were fun to use, I know it's going to sound a little weird to say, but I would say my favorite weapon for this year was probably the Groza and the Striker 45. Those are the two weapons so far that I've used heavily throughout the entire year. The Striker 45, I know a lot of people consider it to be one of the worst guns in the game, but I would say it's actually pretty above average. Yeah, the bullet speed is pretty bad, especially for a gun like that, but keep in mind it is an SMG, but it does have good range as well, and they did improve upon that too. So yeah, I mean, one man's garbage is another man's treasure. That's what I'll say. And as for the Groza, it performs pretty much almost the same, I would say, as the Growl. The only difference, it's kind of like a nerfed Growl. If the Growl ever got nerfed, that's kind of how it looks like it would perform, at least in my mind. And keep in mind, there's a lot less stigma. You go into a lobby, they see you use a Growl and you win the match, they're gonna be like, oh, well, you only won because you used that weapon. But when you use the Groza and you beat them with it, especially those that do use meta weapons, it always feels like an accomplishment. And as for the Growl being meta, this is something that I would say, at least, when it comes to controller lobbies, we were using that the moment the gun even came out. I mean, that stuff was just all over. I mean, it was really annoying. Every person in the world was actually using that gun. And yeah, that stuff, we knew it was going to be meta right from the jump. It was way too overpowered. It didn't really take until a month and a half later for Bobby Plays and just everyone else to figure out that this gun's actually meta material. The weapons overall throughout the entire year were just amazing, like I said, but there were two weapons that I would say I had the most criticism with. Of course, recently we had the ballistic knife come out, and even the Bruin. Those two were the two weapons I was the most critical of. For the Bruin specifically, it was always the reserve glitch that was happening in multiplayer, where you only get one extra mag once you run out of the current mag that you have starting off. I know a lot of people are still like waiting for them to fix that. And keep in mind, like once they do, I have a feeling the Bruin will actually be a pretty good contender in ranked. Really, the only thing that's holding it back is just the reserve issue. I mean, people are ready to use that stuff with the 60 round mag, but we can't. And I know they're buffing it for season 1, but it's not going to mean anything if it doesn't have that reserve fixed. Because if you go into BR, the reserves are fine, but when you go into multiplayer, it's a completely different story. And we don't have any confirmation whether or not it's supposed to be that way or not. Like, we don't know. As for the ballistic knife, it performs fine. The performance is not really the issue. It's just the way that it works. I know that sounds kind of weird, but anyways, what I mean by that is, at least for controllers, the way that you launch the knives is not really the best way that they could have gone about it. So for example, when you use a knife in this game, especially if you're on controller, you don't really use the left trigger for anything, yet they have the launching button for the ballistic knife on the bottom D-pad for some reason. And the thing is also, it's kind of like that thing where, if you pick up a weapon with a controller, you have to like wait a second before it actually picks up the weapon. It's the same situation when you launch the knife when you're pressing on the bottom D-pad. It's weird. Of course, an easy fix for that is just for them to just put the launching button on the left trigger and just have it launch immediately, because using the ballistic knife as it was intended is kind of impossible. You could really only stab. So now that we got the discussion of weapons out of the way, I do want to talk about the tournament mode. So the tournament mode has, let's be honest, it's gone through a lot of changes. Even last year when we first got the introduction to the mode, we ended up, having a very, very competitive one where, it would be free-for-all gun game, and only like the top players, like I guess the top 3, would earn some form of crowns. Of course, I guess a lot of people had problems with that. I know, it's tournament mode. It was supposed to be competitive. A lot of people didn't like the fact that they were going to make it a lot more participation medal based, basically saying that like even if you finish the match, you still earn like a shit ton of crowns. So yeah, I kind of took issue with that, because it does seem like it's supposed to be a competitive mode. Only like the best of the, well, not only the best of the best, but above average players are able to actually get those camos a lot easier than others. It will take longer. Keep in mind, they gave you the weekend, so you had plenty of time even if you were a bad player. My issue is that they made it a little bit too easy, and also the fact that, at least at the beginning, some of the modes were just trash. I know a lot of people hated the swords and stones mode where you had to use boxing gloves the entire time, because that was really like the only effective melee weapon other than nunchucks that were able to help you at least win the match. But if it wasn't that, then it was ground war. And, ground war is fun, but it also depends on what map that you're playing it on. Satellite, I know a lot of people don't like that map for normal multiplayer, but it's really good in ground war. But when it came to that other map, that snow one, that I think it was called Crossroads, well, I guess it was like an extension of Crossroads Strike, that one kind of sucked ass, I'll admit. That one wasn't really that great. And I think at some point, they might have added Anaya Incursion into that ground war mode. I don't know why they didn't in the first place. It's such a perfect map for that. But yeah, ground war was alright. It wasn't the best. Swords and Stones was hell. A lot of people hated that. So I think because of that response, we ended up getting the option to either do multiplayer or BR. And of course, given that I wanted to have like a chill Friday, me and my friends usually always picked BR. And plus it helps me get to legendary BR without actually having to just go into normal BR modes. As for BR though, I had a lot of issues with that one too. And it wasn't any game crashing issues or anything like that, but it just mainly had to do with what was being dropped in every single game that I had. So for example, like the chips, the weapon perks, and even the weapon themselves were kind of weird to me. At least when it comes to the assault rifles, it was alright. Sniper rifles in BR are kind of pointless for the most part, unless you have like maybe a semi-auto. But when it came to the SMGs, man, I felt like they really dropped the ball with that one, mainly because that every SMG that you picked up only had 20 rounds. And it made it even worse given the fact that extended mag for at least assault rifles and SMGs was actually a pretty rare commodity. Of course, they would have some other SMG that would have like maybe 40 bullets or maybe 30 starting off, but they were rare. They were really rare to find. For the most part, I was just finding nothing but the OTS, the CX9 throughout the entire time, and it was just really annoying because you couldn't use SMGs at all. And the only time I would ever find extended mags was when it was for snipers. I mean, how many times you guys went looking for extended mags and all you would find is sniper extended mag? And keep in mind, snipers were rarely ever used in Alcatraz, ever. Like, I don't think there was like one person that I ever been killed by that used the sniper. Keep in mind, there were moments where I had to like maybe pick up a kilo bolt action or maybe XPR, because that was like really the only thing I could find at that moment. Keep in mind, when you go into Cell House, there's a lot of people dropping with you, so you kind of had to just make do with what you have at that exact moment. But of course, we had other issues like the HSO and the KRM being a little bit too dominant, especially in Alcatraz. I mean, that's really like one of the primary reasons as to why a lot of people would even get first place. But it wasn't something that would bother me too often, because even if we got second place, we would still get enough crowns to the point where it wouldn't slow down our progress at all. If anything, I usually see tournament mode as like this relaxing type of thing where you get to just hang out with your friends and just, you know, progress through all the crown levels and get all the rewards. And actually, speaking of the rewards, I do actually want to talk about all the seasonal camos that were released this year. So we had camos like Gold and Emerald, which was a pretty shitty camo, let's be honest, to really start off the year. And then eventually we ended up getting Blistering Magma. I think that was, I'm not sure if that was before Golden Emerald. That might have been after or before. I kind of forgot. But then we got like the amazing camo, which was of course Fluorescence. So yeah, Fluorescence was by far, like throughout this entire year, the best tournament camo that we received. I am 1000% confident about that statement, and I'm sure a lot of people are not really going to fight me on that. But man, like after Fluorescent came out, like I think tournament mode kind of reached its peak at the moment. And that's because like every camo that got released after that just completely went to shit. After Fluorescence, we ended up getting Pixelated Aggression, and then we got Making Waves, and then Assault Pattern, and finally Ice Locked, which all of them were pretty garbage, to be honest. I mean, Pixelated Aggression was pretty cool, depending on the lighting of certain maps. I mean, it did change colors. It was kind of like one of those, I guess, more dynamic stationary camos, much like Assault Pattern, where it just really had its shine. But if you used it on like legendary skins or mythic or just anything that was above epic rarity, it would have like this weird black design, which right now isn't really present right now in the game. Maybe they're trying to fix that up for next season, or I guess this next major update. But man, like it was a complete letdown. But I would say the absolute worst one for the entire year had to be Ice Locked, the one that we just got this season. And trust me, I hope we never get anything like that again. My best guess as to why the creativity kind of declined with these camos is probably that the devs realized it was very easy to get these camos in the first place, so they probably thought, you know, maybe we should put a little bit less effort on these camos since anyone could just get them. Which, as weird as it sounds, I kind of agree with. Like, I know it sounds kind of like I know it's a horrible take, but it is kind of true. I mean, anyone could just come into tournament mode, play Alcatraz for like a few minutes and just get themselves a few camos. Which kind of also defeats the purpose of completionist camos, because honestly, I don't really see a lot of people like using completionist camos often. And if they do, it's usually diamond camo, but for the most part, it will usually just be seasonal camos. And the obvious reason for that is because everything fucking sucks. And of course, even now, it's still an unfortunate truth with COD Mobile. Like, I kind of wish that the game came out a year later when it did, because we probably would have had DM Ultra as a completionist camo. And again, I know this is like kind of like just beating a dead horse at this point, but yeah, like the camos that you earn getting Damascus, even now that you have to get every weapon gold now, even the new ones, it just doesn't make it really seem worth the effort. And that's why I don't really see a lot of people using Damascus unless they just finished grinding for it. But you guys also see me use Damascus when I'm trying to grind for diamond, but that's basically it. That's like the only time you'll ever see me use Damascus. And still, 4 years into this game, I mean, maybe 3.5 of having completionist camos as well, we still haven't gotten a reward for getting everything diamond. So yes, we're still on that boat I think fluorescence probably would have been a good all diamond reward just to have it for every weapon. And given the rarity, like, I mean, keep in mind, not every player has everything diamond, so it would be just crazy to see that one player in the lobby that has it. Just bragging rights up the ass, man. I mean, I think we would have. I think maybe this will be the year. Maybe year 5 will finally be the year that we get that. I mean, they're making a lot of different changes, but I don't know. I highly doubt it. I don't think they're gonna make something this far into the game at this point. We're just gonna hope that, I guess, tournament mode has a better camo than fluorescent, but I highly doubt that's going to happen. So now, speaking of camos, we do also have to talk about Ether Crystal, because earlier this year, around October, they did update Undead Siege. Well, they brought it back. And of course, they didn't really make any changes to Undead Siege. Me and my friend Parker were debating whether or not this hell mode was going to be a thing, but it was just nightmare mode. It was just named differently depending on where you're at in the world. But yeah, Ether Crystal was updated to be supported on all the newer weapons such as the Kilo, Krig, and so on. And even now, I mean, this was like the last major update, but in the major update for December, they managed to add Ether Crystal for even the Groza, Bruin, and just the Ballistic Knife as well. So it looks like to me that every major update that we get, we might get Ether Crystal supported for whatever new weapons may come. So that's a good thing, and that's something that I think they should have done for a very long time. But I'll tell you, getting back into Undead Siege, it kind of reminded me why I hated doing it in the first place, because again, it's very repetitive and you have to like play 6 games for like every gun. Of course, you could do multiple guns in a single game of Undead Siege hard mode, but just the fact that you're just there for hours on end trying to get all those guns that could have been done like just if COD Mobile made the right update choices, it was hell. I will say that. I mean, it was maybe about like less than half of the guns that we had to do when it initially came out for every gun, but yeah, it's still hell doing it. So here's to hoping that they keep updating it, at least the Ether Crystal camos, to support those newer guns. Let's just hope that they keep doing that. But yeah, anyways, let's actually talk about the signature attachments that were released. Keep in mind, not a lot of them were released. I feel like they kind of been slacking off when it comes to that. Most of the signature attachments that we do unlock, oh my god, they're just plain useless. I mean, don't get me wrong, last year was amazing. We got the Thunderbolt Sling, we got a lot of stuff that assisted a lot of different guns. And I would say the Branson Barrel was by far one of the best ones last year. But oh my god, this whole entire fucking year of 2023 was a complete disaster for every single one of these attachments. I think I would go as far as to say I think the only good attachment that got released was probably the retractable barrel for the Striker. And that's it. The Macro Mag IFS for the ICR would have been great if the downsides weren't so severe. So, I mean, that was another one that was alright. I mean, it expanded the mag by 10 bullets and it gave you a lot more bullet impact, which is a feature I'll get into later on in this video. But, yeah, this magazine, as good as it was, it just provided way too many downsides. It's kind of like the GRU combo grip with the AK-47. It has great features and everything, but the downside was that it was extremely heavy for just no reason. Well, I mean, yes, there was a reason. I mean, you got a lot of bullet spread from that thing. You got suppressor built in. You got extra range and all that stuff. But 35% ADS speed alongside other downsides when the AK-47 itself is already a pretty slow gun. Yeah, and they never changed it. That's one thing. And even for the Macro Mag IFS for the ICR, I don't really think they're going to change that one either. But yeah, everything else, all the other signature attachments, such as the flashlight, the heartbeat sensor for the Hades of all guns, like, dude, like, I don't even know why they bothered to go through all the effort of making that. I think with the RUS, that flashlight was probably the worst attachment that they released throughout the year. Imagine releasing a flashlight in a game where all the maps usually take place in the middle of the fucking day, where you have enemies that have red lights around them that you could easily see. Like, it just doesn't make any sense why they did that. I tried to find a use for it, and maybe like in those Night Summit maps, they were okay, but they were never really enough. And keep in mind, like, the batteries were so weak, you might as well have gotten them from a flea market, because they only lasted for like 10 to 15 seconds. I know they're trying to balance it out, but for a flashlight, why? The heartbeat sensor of all things, as stupid as it was to add it for the Hades, at least that had more battery. It had like about 30 to 40 seconds of battery. But for the flashlight to only have like 5 seconds, and the fact that it's also pointless is just so stupid. Bottom line, the retractable barrel was probably the only good attachment that came out. And it was for the striker, which I'll be honest, I mean, it kind of needed it. It's kind of like a Brenton barrel help for the striker. It doesn't, of course, give it that burst thing, but it did help massively when it came to its bullet spread accuracy. So basically, you were able to one tap and two tap a little further away, which was something that the striker did need. So now that we've gone over the signature attachment part of the video, I do want to talk about the new features to Gunsmith that they did add, which is, of course, bullet impact. So just in case you guys aren't aware, certain guns in the game will provide more flinch to the enemy depending on what gun it actually is. So for example, if you have a weak gun like the Fennec, it won't provide a lot of flinch compared to before, which, I mean, it was abysmal. Trust me when I say that. But you know, if you're using stuff like the EM2 or even the Odin, it's going to cause the enemy to flinch a lot more. I would say like the LMGs and maybe the Odin in general were like probably the best weapons for bullet impact. But the Macromag IFS, you know, going back to that for the ICR, it did provide some pretty good benefits when it came to, you know, using bullet impact. And, you know, there are certain ammo conversions that either increase or decrease your bullet impact. So for example, for the AK-47, it's usually at 1.3, but if you use the 545 mags, I think it goes down to like 1.1 or something like that. So it does get a little bit weaker. So it, depending on what you use for certain weapons, the bullet impact will either be stronger or it will be weaker. I mean, adding this feature was cool and all. I mean, I kind of wish it affected snipers more, but in terms of just like, you know, other gunfights, if you're getting to like a face-to-face gunfight with someone that may have a man of war, but you know, it also depends also on what weapon you're using as well. So there are weapons that are a little bit more resistant to bullet impact. So for example, again, if you use the Odin, you probably have less flinch than if you were using, of course, the MAC-10 or the Fennec. So again, depending on what weapon you use, you will also flinch in a certain way. The thing is that it did not affect snipers as I hoped it would. You could still be aiming down your sights and someone could be hitting you with the Odin with that that little duplex or that silencer mag that makes your bullet impact even stronger, and it still won't even do anything. Like snipers still have like way too little flinch. If you're aiming down your sights and I shoot you with an Odin, you should be like looking at the sky with your scope. Like that's how much flinch it should have. And even when it comes to the perk toughness, it should barely be doing anything with snipers. So that's bullet impact for you. It's a cool feature. It got me off of toughness finally, so I could use stuff like quick fix or ghost or whatever the other green perks that's not toughness. So yeah, that was a good change for me. So now I guess we could get to the ranked portion of this video. So yes, I did play ranked probably like 2 or 3 times. I mean, I'm not gonna count BR because it was just Alcatraz, but I did play ranked a few times this year to at least try to get the Kurohana until I realized it's like, dude, I have like 3 legendary skins for the DRH. I don't really think I need another one. I mean, and plus all the work that you do, trust me, it is not worth it. Like all the pain that you have to go through, the way that, you know, the matchmaking is balanced in ranked isn't really ideal. Like, especially for players that are like probably trying to reach legendary for the first time as well. I don't know, like, just point is, just don't do that well in some games because you're going to get punished pretty severely for it. And I say that like with so much, I guess, like certainty, because I mean, I was in master lobbies going against top 5,000 players for some reason. I don't know why that was happening, but like some of the times I was grinding ranked right before the ranked season would end. So you would think it would be like the smoothest thing in the world to just do it around that time. But no, like I was like Master 1 going against like top 5,000 players, which is fucking bullshit. And it's funny because, you know, whenever you do grind up to a new section in rank, so let's say you go from Master to Grandmaster or Grandmaster to Legendary, it always tells you that you beat like 90-something% of the player base. And at first I was a little skeptical about that. Maybe they just said that just to make you feel good. but I'm starting to believe it more if they're constantly putting me against top 5,000 players. But even now, despite all that, I still believe that number is a lie. I mean, I cannot, like, dude, most of this game is just revolved around rank. I mean, maybe I just seen too many YouTubers, but I mean, ranked is kind of like one of the core parts of this game. So it's hard to believe that 99 or 97% of players are not legendary or not even playing ranked. I mean, you could really be the worst player on the planet and still make it to legendary at some point, or even to grandmaster. So yeah, I don't understand how there's such a low population there. But I'll be honest, I kind of just quit in the middle of it. Again, I realized that the DRH is not really worth it. And even now when I got to, I guess, pick it up from the ground, it's not really something that matters too much to me. I thought it was going to be I thought it was going to be like girls' frontline levels of good, you know? What you saw in the Greenup version. Those like little legendary skins for the ICR M4 that had like different, you know, death effects as well as like inspections. I thought it was going to be something like that. But no, it's just a simple legendary skin. To be honest, anyone that like grinded to top 5,000 every single one of these seasons probably should have been entitled to like 2 or 3 other legendary skins. That I'm just saying. I mean, all that effort, all that stress to only get one legendary skin is kind of bullshit. I kind of wish they would have gone a little bit more than just that. But of course, I'm not the only one that has negative thoughts on ranked. I mean, it was hell doing it. That's why I just fucking stopped. I just honestly, I'm 4 years like plus already into this game. I'm just too tired at this point to even care. So a lot of people had a lot of negative things to say about ranked, mainly saying that skill-based matchmaking was kind of trash. And you know, I didn't realize it until my friend got back into the game after not playing for like 2 years, where like every single lobby he was like just carrying. He was playing team deathmatch or frontline, and he would get like maybe 25 or more kills and still lose the game because the other team was just, or I guess the other people in his team were just completely incompetent. Major YouTubers were saying that. I think even at one point, Ferg or Bobby Plays has said it at some point that the skill-based matchmaking is a little bit too strict or just way too unfair. And again, I mean, I'm for the skill-based since it is ranked, but, you know, there is a limit. I mean, if you're, like, fucking Master going against top 5,000, or even in Grandmaster, like, you shouldn't be dealing with those types of people. As for meta weapons, that's something that's probably just never going to change. It's a competitive mode. Everyone's always just going to use the most broken thing that they could find. But yeah, I mean, my take is just solid on that one. I mean, I'm not going to really go further into that. So now it's time to talk about the competence, or I guess at times the incompetence of the developers that were working on this game this year. So for the most part, at least for the first half of this year, it was fine. There wasn't really a lot of issues to, I guess, address. Most of it, you know, we went through most of the season smoothly, and it wasn't until the Halloween season where just everything kind of just went to shit, where, you know, we started having issues with ADS bugs where a lot of guns were slower than they should be. The only ones that weren't were suspiciously all the meta weapons for ranked, or just anything that had a mythic on it. But yeah, if you try to use like a Maddox or a Growl or just anything that didn't have a mythic, everything was just extremely slow for some reason. This whole bug started like immediately when the CX9 first came out, like, you know, the Halloween update. And just using the CX9 throughout that entire time, diamond grinding it, just made everything feel awkward. Because, you know, the way that the game was, it was very hard to adjust to. And when I finally did, they finally fixed everything else, so I had to readjust again. And it was hell. I mean, this is something that took them way longer than it should have to change. And yes, like, there were many updates here and there that were, you know, slowly adjusting some of the guns. I mean, the Peacekeeper was fixed, the CX9 was fixed, the QQ9 was fixed, the Fennec was fixed. All those weapons were getting fixed. But after that, like, then they just slowed down for a whole major update. And even during that time, in that major update, there still wasn't any changes. It wasn't until like a recent mini update where I guess most of the weapons, if not all of them, with the exception of like the Striker 45 and a few other guns that weren't changed, finally got changed. But man, it took them way too long to do that. This change was something that at first I thought it was a legit feature that they were adding into the game. But then they said it was a bug, and then I was assuming that maybe within a few days after the update came out, they would have fixed it, but then they didn't, and we're just stuck with it forever. But not only that, I mean, like, they were so just incompetent with the Bruin. And I mean that a lot because, again, we don't know if it's built in or not. You know, the reserve bug has been an issue since the Bruin came out, and they still haven't fixed it. So hopefully, in this next update for season 1, they finally adjust it. But dude, come on, like it's something so simple. Like I don't understand how they're just messing this up. And not even that. I mean, this update, we lost Ether Crystal for all the guns that we grinded for in the last major update for October. Like all those guns, the Growl, the Kilo, all that stuff just went away just magically. And we just had to wait for the devs to just give us back the camos. And even now, we still don't have all of them done, or at least all of them like returned. But like, there's still a few left. But still, I mean, like, this is an issue that shouldn't have been an issue in the first place. I also already mentioned my thoughts on the ballistic knife. That was so fucking stupid. Like, why? Like, for at least for the controller, they could have done it a little bit better. Like I said, to launch the knife, they could have just had it for the left trigger since you don't use it when you're using a knife. But I mean, even that they messed up. It's yeah, I don't know. Like, they don't really think ahead a lot of the times when it comes to these updates. Or sometimes I wonder whether or not they even test these updates. The people that were in charge of the blog post, or at least replying to the comments and feedback, were also pretty stupid as well. So this happened a lot, especially when it came to the ADS bug that a lot of people were addressing, but they still weren't fixing. They would say shit like, "Oh, don't worry, we'll ping the team," and then like, you know, things would like weeks would go by without any changes at all. And then we'll go to them again and say, "Hey, this thing's still broken. We still need this fixed." And they're just like, "Oh, I swear to God, I thought we did fix it. Don't worry, I'll ping the team." And then like we'll just repeat the cycle over and over again for like months until they finally got it right. It's just like, how much do they talk to their devs? Like that's what I want to know, because it feels like the devs don't tell them anything. And again, like I said, at the very beginning of the year, like the first half of 2023, they were doing just fine. And then like they were just ball dropping after ball dropping throughout the entire second half of the year. I guess we can't have too much of a good thing, right, guys? So now finally that we talked about everything that we needed to talk about, let's actually talk about the skins for a second. And not just the legendaries and mythics, but also the battle pass skins. So I know for the most part, some of them are just really hit or miss. You know, it really depends on the player whether or not they like the skins. But I'll admit, first half of the year, they were pretty shit. I mean, the HDR Maddox were fine. But, you know, there was a point in time where, like, just all of them really just sucked. And then, like, I guess at the end of this year, they started to, like, really ramp up the creativity a bit with, like, the CX-9 and even, like, the Groza now. I mean, they're a lot more creative than they were before. So yeah, I mean, I do see a creativity spike when it comes to these battle pass skins. As for the prestige skins, throughout the entire year, we got the Arctic 50, we got the Swordfish, Kalaka Prestige. We end up getting, of course, at the end of the year, the HG 40, as well as just other types of prestige skins. And for the most part, again, they were kind of hit or miss. Some of them were really good, some of them were just alright. None of them were really that bad, but I mean, I'm still on that fence where I think if you have the original legendary skin, you could at least have that immediately count as one legendary skin for the progress. I think that would be kind of fair, because, you know, when it came to the Death Scythe Prestige, I already had the original one. For the Durando, I had the original. For the Kalaka, I had the original. For even the Firefox, or not the Firefox, or the Foxfire, sorry. I was thinking about the website, like the little Firefox thing. But yeah, the Foxfire Arctic 50, I have the original one as well. Like, all those should have counted as one at least. But that's the prestige skins for you. They're nothing too crazy. Just fancier versions of original legendary skins that came out in the past. But as for just legendaries in general, they did improve them a bit now that, like, you know, I guess they have to evolve a little bit further. You know, when you inspect them, they now have sound effects. That's really the only change that they made throughout this entire year. But it's nice to see that, especially with the prestige skins, at least the ones that came out in the past, they did add, like, custom inspections to, you know, the Koromaku Prestige as well as the Death Scythe Prestige. So that was some cool changes. They didn't add any sound effects to them, but just really just the visual effect. Stuff like that alone was enough for me to get a little bit more legendary skins. I think during the summer, that's the one that was like the one season. Like, I think when the Striker 45 came out, they were having like all these different offers. I ended up getting like 8 legendary skins, 8 or 9 throughout the entire season. I also ended up getting the ZRG in that legendary crate for the Exostatic and just the I guess the ZRG as well. Like it had like another one, but I forgot what it was. It was I think it was like the Sigrun or something. But yeah, I ended up getting that thing for like 80 to like 90 days. So I got to enjoy that skin for whatever time I had with it. But that's something I do also want to discuss is the fact that like the way that they're selling these skins now is a lot more generous than they usually do in the past years. I mean, every gun skin never, I mean, most legendary skins back in the past would never have like any sort of discount, but now they're just adding these discounts left to right. A lot of skins, a lot of draws especially do have like 15 to 20% off sometimes. I mean, I just heard recently that they're adding like all these random discounts to for you legendary skins in that section just randomly to random players. So yeah, they are making them a little bit more generous, and probably the most generous form of like sales that they've done is probably the armory. So the first time that we got introduced to the armory was during the Halloween update this year, where we were given the chance to get the AK-47, the Holger, the Maddox, just a lot of different Halloween themed skins in a single draw that was extremely generous for what it was. There were people that would end up getting all of the legendary skins in a single set of 10 spins, which is around maybe like 1200 COD points. So yeah, and plus like anyone that had those skins previously before that draw came out were already awarded like a few extra thousand series points. And it happened again during the holiday armory where you were able, like for all the 6 legendary skins that they sold, you were rewarded for every single one of them. And since I already had all those Christmas skins from last year when I got that mythic calling card, I was still rewarded all those series points, and they carry over to the next armory where you could just use them, and if you have enough, you could literally just get a few free legendary skins if you want to. And what made this even more generous was the fact that any legendary skin that you earned from those armory draws, you were able to count them towards your prestige. So let's say you just had none of those in the Halloween armory or even the Christmas armory. All those things that you would have gone in that armory would have counted towards your prestige skin. So you end up getting like another one for free. So it's crazy how generous they were with the legendary skins now. I know sometimes it's not really a good business strategy to keep milking the same skins over and over again, especially in the For You section, but the way that they did it was absolute genius. It's far better than what it was years ago. And I know people have the right to be pissed off for paying full price for some of these skins back in the past, but I mean, we can't think of ourselves here like just purely, I mean, you know, if I was a new player, I would go for this immediately. You know, it's nice that, you know, new players get to at least experience the skins at a much cheaper price compared to what we had to go through. It's like if you have a kid, right? Like let's say you had a hard life as a child, but you don't want your own kid to have a hard life. It's kind of like that. And finally for the crates, so, you know, in terms of the For You section, they still kind of fucked up on that. I mean, they haven't really added a lot of good For You crates. Most of it just stayed the same until recently where they changed it. And even then, they don't really change it that often. I don't think they actually did this entire, like, new major update. So that's something right there. But they added these strong boxes, which basically allow you to get epics a lot easier since there's like less content in them. But you get to at least finally get to use all of the coupons that you earn throughout tournament mode. And I know a lot of you guys probably had thousands of them like stored there because, I mean, let's be honest, most crates don't allow you to use most of them. So yeah, I'm glad that they added something like that, and they made the draw thing a little bit fair for most of these things. You know, a bronze coupon, you needed 3 to do 1 draw. If you had a silver coupons, you could use 2 for 1 spin, or if you had gold, you could use 1 for 1 spin. I mean, bouncing like that was actually pretty good. And it makes me look forward to what we're getting later on in the future, especially for Season 1. I mean, the strong boxes there should be pretty good as well. But yeah, overall this entire year was alright in the first half, a little shitty in the second half, but I would say I was pretty indifferent with it. I mean, there was a lot of good changes, especially when it comes to features. You know, the fact that you can now play very high graphics with ultra frames is pretty cool. Max graphics, I'm still a little torn on, mainly because I don't think anyone's going to reduce their frame rates just for slight changes in graphics. So yeah, honestly, like I don't even think you even needed to lower your frames for something like that. But of course, you guys already know my take on that. But here's to hoping that season, or I guess, you know, year 5 will be a lot better with a lot of different updates. Hopefully, you know, overhauls to the UI, maybe some gunsmith changes, and maybe finally an all diamond camo or something like close, maybe a medal for it. Anything would be fine. But yeah, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this pretty long video, and I'll see you guys next time.